Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Of course, we have his year, Cato, 62 BCE. I think Cicero was the consul the year before, right? Pretty sure. Not sure. Pretty sure. Anyway, we had the Catiline Conspiracy. We had a crazy Cicero type year. So go check out that video if you haven't seen that one yet, because that kind of leans into this video, I believe. But his year, Cato. Let's see what we got in store. I have no idea what we got, but that's what we're here for. Let's go.
Cato was never elected consul, so video over. Goodbye.
Alright, cool. Oh, wait.
But I feel like talking about Cato, so let's look at his term as tribune of the plebs in 62 BCE. Well, mostly. For whatever reason, tribunes of the plebs took office on December 10th, so the beginning of Cato's year slightly overlaps with the end of Cicero's year.
I've never seen these months this way. So, Ienarius is obviously January, Februarius, Martius, March, Aprilius, Maius, Iunius, Quintilis, which will become July, Sextilis, which will become August, September, October. It's funny how September through December are the actual burrs. Funny how that stayed. Interesting.
When Cato took office late in 63 BCE, the conservatives had already joined forces and destroyed most of the Catiline Conspiracy. The city was now safe, but sharply divided. Groups of Catilina's supporters had been hanging around outside of the Senate House, harassing senators and threatening to start a riot. In this context, Cato's role as the tribune of the plebs became all the more important. There were 10 of them elected every year, and they could propose legislation to both the popular assembly and to the Senate. They could also veto any legislation or action coming from any other elected official. You can think of them as a popular counterbalance against the Senate.
Checks and balances.
It was kind of strange that a staunch conservative and a creature of the Senate was elected to this office, which was usually dominated by populists and reformers. But with the conservatives politically ascendant, and the city still on the brink of violence, Cato knew that everyone was anxious to see what his faction was going to do next. The first thing Cato did was introduce legislation related to the grain dole. For the past 60 years...
Isn't this where you have the cap on it's basically price control?
Rome had operated a public program where they had bought grain from overseas, stored it in government-run warehouses, and sold it at subsidized rates throughout
at a loss
the year to poor citizens who met certain requirements. Traditionally, the conservative faction had liked to make a show of chipping away at the grain dole whenever possible. Now, Cato put legislation forward that would quadruple the size of the dole overnight.
So is he even conservative?
So what was Cato doing? He was co-opting one of the big legislative goals of the reform faction. He was betting, rightly in my opinion, that a well-fed city was much less likely to support radical revolutionaries like Catilina.
True.
He also wanted to associate reformers with the negative aspects of the Catiline Conspiracy, and disassociate them from some of the more popular stuff, like expanding the grain dole. Cato introduced the bill before the Senate, and although Cicero, as consul, raised some objections at the extremely high cost of the bill, many other conservatives got on board, and it passed easily. As you would expect, it was even more popular with the public assembly, who stood to benefit from the bill directly. It was passed into law. Imagine the logistical nightmare of having to buy and store all of that additional grain.
Yeah, I'd love to see the logistics here, like, where did they store it? How do they store it? Like, who was in charge of that? Was it federal workers of the state? And then at that point, like, what was the threshold you had to be under to actually receive grain dole? What did you receive? How did you receive it? I'm interested in that type of stuff. Interesting stuff, right?
Poor bureaucrat's job instantly got 4 times harder. Sometime later, Cicero had left office. The leading conspirators had been executed, but a small ragtag rebel army remained on the field. Another tribune of the plebs, a guy named Metellus Nepos, put a bill before the Senate to recall Pompey and his army from the east and to have him take command of the city. Cato opposed this, saying that the conspiracy was under control and, hey, let's be reasonable. We've got 2 perfectly competent consuls here, elected by the people. Why don't we just let one of them take care of the army? Metellus responded by calling Cato a coward and threatened to ignore the
Bro, like all these buzzwords continuously. We've seen that so many times before. Coward, coward. You are not in favor of the state. Crazy.
The Senate's advice on this matter and take the bill directly to the public assembly. Cato responded by saying something along the lines of, "Pompey and his army enters this city over my dead body." Let's back up for some context. The last time somebody had taken command of the city, they had installed themselves as dictator and systematically murdered their political opponents.
Jeez.
I've touched on this before. This was Sulla.
Yeah.
Pompey had been one of Sulla's lieutenants, so you can understand why this was setting off alarms in Cato's head. He had no intention of letting history repeat itself. Days later, Metellus did as he had promised, and took his bill to the public assembly without the consent of the Senate. Cato went down there with another conservative tribune of the plebs to put a stop to the whole thing. Metellus instructed a clerk to begin proceedings by reading the bill aloud, and Cato immediately vetoed it. Metellus then took over reading
because he can. That's part of his role. He can veto pretty much anything, right? And I'm wondering, like, veto. I think I've asked this before, but within vetoes, can you have double jeopardy? So, like, in a reverse, not like you can be tried, but in double jeopardy of like, can you reintroduce the same bill that's been vetoed, or do you have to change something?
The bill himself, and Cato vetoed it again, this time grabbing the bill from his hands. Metellus continued reciting the bill from memory, and Cato's conservative colleague threw his hand over Metellus' mouth to stop him from speaking. By the way, violence against the tribune of the plebs was a crime punishable by death. And this seems like...
Well, that's just like one of those things, right? That's like if you cross the Pomerium, not through that gate, there's like a certain gate you have to... If you pass outside of it, you're condemned to death. So it's like one of those laws.
An act of violence to me, but nothing would come of it. Anyway, the crowd saw this altercation going down on the stage, and started attacking the other conservatives in attendance. The crowd only dispersed when rumors started to spread that a consul was approaching with a gang of armed men, something that would have been illegal if it had been true, which it wasn't. But
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, what we saw what Cicero had the year before. He had, it was the final act in that case, but he had armed men inside the Pomerium.
The crowd scattered anyways, and the bill was not passed. Metellus was so bitter over this incident that he left the city in protest.
Wow.
Tribunes of the plebs were actually forbidden from leaving the city during their term, but considering the laundry list of illegal stuff that had just happened, nobody bothered to stop him. The Senate formally endorsed Cato's handling of the situation. They tried to go a step further and strip Metellus of his tribuneship, not for fleeing the city, but for starting a riot. But Cato talked them out of it.
Good.
Side note, Julius Caesar had publicly supported Metellus through this whole ordeal.
He wasn't here though, right? He had left.
He was serving as one of the 8 praetors that year, but when Metellus fled the city, Caesar renounced his praetorship in solidarity.
Wow. Caesar's a very interesting character, man. He's very... So maybe I just don't know him enough yet, even though we've done a ton on Caesar already, but he's very much a wild card.
The next day, an angry mob assembled outside Caesar's home, wanting to march on the Senate and do God knows what. Caesar spoke to the mob, calmed everybody down, and sent them home. The Senate was impressed by Caesar's statesmanship, and restored him to the office he had just resigned. But Cato voted against this. Caesar had had some suspicious peripheral role in the Catiline Conspiracy, and now he had some peripheral role in this Metellus affair. This didn't sit right with Cato. From this moment on, the rivalry between these two men would only grow.
Crazy, man. And then, of course, his year, Julius Caesar, is 3 years later. It's insane, right? Because, by the way, if we can continue this, like, just go watch the series we did for Historia Civilis from this all the way to when Cleopatra and Antony ultimately meet their demise in Alexandria, when Octavius and Marcus Agrippa goes in. But put back on this, it was this very, very short and sweet Cato video, kind of understanding like a reform role that was sat with a conservative, so it was very much a moderate in my opinion. Identity politics can only go so far in terms of like who a person is, I think it should be more enacted by the actions of someone versus the labels of someone. So the actions show that he's more of a moderate. He's meeting in people in the middle, especially like the grain dole will actually. I mean, that's very much a reform policy, right? So like if you increase the grain dole, he has like conservative ambitions and intent behind it, but still it's like it's straight up like a reform. So 4x grain dole allows the expansion of basically handouts to people that are not able to meet their own, you know, they're not able to get that food themselves at that rate. So um, what else happened? And then that was just kind of part of it. And then we kind of moved into the Pompey quashing the rebellion, the Catiline Conspiracy rebellion, which is really interesting given that Caesar was sort of in solidarity with that. There's so many things. There's crossing lines here in my head about what's going on. But guys, what do you guys think? Let me know if I missed anything. But this is very short and sweet Cato video to really understand like maybe like the preemptive nature of what will happen in the future. Historia Civilis is always providing amazing content, and I'm sure there's a lot more videos that he has that we've got to kind of tackle. I really hope he starts putting out more content though, because I think he hasn't put out content in quite a little bit. I'd love for him to touch on so many different topics. I feel like he could really do well with the Napoleonic series. Like a Napoleonic series would be really good because he did like the post-Napoleon videos, like what happened after the fact. But there's like Brumaire. I think he could do that really, really good. And a lot of things actually. So Historia Civilis, you'll probably never hear this, but come on, man, get back on the saddle. We love you. Until next time, though. Peace out. Bye bye.